This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Wednesday, August 26, 2020, and my guest is JC Bagnell. Hi, how are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing really well. I'm really glad. I was just looking at our Skype log, and it's been about a year since we've had a conversation last. I'm really glad to talk to you again.
That's part of the reason I wanted to have you on. I was like, damn, I haven't had JC on in such a while. And also, I was looking at your content recently, and I've been covering a lot of earbuds. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about, the Galaxy Buds Live a little bit. I know you don't have them, but I do. And in general, more like some of the things you've covered in your videos lately, which is like people don't know how to wear earbuds. It's driving me nuts. And then, of course, we have to talk of the elephant in the room, which is the Surface Duo unboxings came up this morning. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted your take on this dual screen Android life that's coming upon us based on our combined experience using things like the LG dual screen cases, the latest of which is the LG Velvet, which I just reviewed for Hot Hardware, and I know you've been playing with extensively.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that. I want to hear your thoughts in general about where we're at today without the Duo and the dual screen world, and where do you think we're going, and whether we can pull it off.
Yeah, I mean, my big mission over the last couple of years has just been to talk up competition, and I think a lot of us in the tech space are tired of trying to classify phones by price. Like there can only be one winner at $999 and one winner at $499. When instead, especially over this last year, it's been beautiful seeing some pretty wild and experimental phones hitting the market again. And Velvet, I think, is a really good representation of playing the right compromises while still trying to build a nice experience. And LG's software game has improved tremendously. I mean, there's still definitely room for improvement on LG. We used to just always sort of instantly pan LG software, but they're executing a modular strategy that's a lot more exciting when we're looking at really trying to push the boundaries of what you can do on a phone on the go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For me, the big challenge about their software is not so much being that it hasn't gotten better. I think it has. I feel like it's faster and more streamlined for sure, but I feel the aesthetics need a revamp. And I feel like in the same way as the Velvet, like kind of rebooted the industrial design aspects of the LG phone and finally brought them, back to 2020 in a way, because they were kind of like stuck on that V30 design language, which wasn't terrible at the time, but kind of aged poorly in my opinion.
Oh, well, and it was inconsistent because they had gone, if you remember the G7 days, they were still playing with an iPhone-like launcher experience. Yeah. I mean, those were the dark days of LG software. But now I think everyone's trying to kind of piggyback on this South Korean Samsung style, like where we see
One
the
UI,
OnePlus. Yeah, big bubbly panels and moving icons around. And even OnePlus is taking a step in that direction on the Android 11 beta. So, it's funny because LG's new UX kind of catches them up to 2019. They're speaking a 2019 design language. But for LG, that's still a pretty good shot in the arm from where they used to be.
But I still feel like, when I heard about the Velvet and how they were going to reboot their design, I was like, okay, great, that's nice. And then I don't feel like there's much of a difference between the software on the Velvet versus software on the V60. And so...
Yeah, it's very subtle.
I was hoping there'd be more of a revamp.
I mean, like, you got to go digging. It's things like the desktop mode is functionally more usable on the Velvet. That's not going to be a key core service for a lot of smartphone users. Things like shortcuts got better. People have been talking up the Surface Duo for having these like instant 2-screen launcher shortcuts.
But that was on the V60, wasn't it?
It didn't launch on the V60. V60 is catching up to Velvet.
I see. So,
right. Again, it's really little things like that. But again, every phone that's come out, I would say since the G8, we've seen a little bit of polish here, a little bit of refinement there. It's a huge ship to steer. And I think LG really hasn't gotten enough credit for making some of these changes, even if they aren't as visible or as exciting as we'd hoped they would be.
I think so. I think you're right. My concern was the LG Velvet. If I had to sell it to someone,
Yeah.
like convince
It's
them
tough.
about it, it's a tough sell because of two things. First of all, ignoring the dual screen case, and because I pretty much ignored the dual screen case in my review, I explained that the experience is very similar as what you'd get on a V60 with the latest software updates, and I pointed them to my V60 review. But I wanted to actually try the Velvet as a non-dual display device. I wanted I haven't used an LG phone really standalone, as its main purpose for a while, and I want to see in a world. I love that expression. in a world where people buy single screen devices right now, and that $500 5G-ish, around the $500 mark, 5G price point is very competitive. Where does the Velvet fit into that? And my takeaway was this is a very competent phone that does everything pretty decently, but it's basically kind of boring and not spectacular enough to stand out, especially for $600, especially when it's carrier locked in the US or carrier exclusive.
Right.
And so that's kind of my issue. It's I wish if it stayed at $600, and this again standalone, we can add the case and it makes a completely different story. But standalone, I wish it had, for $600, I wish it had a 90 hertz display. I wish it had OIS on the main camera, and it was available unlocked. At that price point, with those only changing those three things, I could say this phone is competitive today. But I feel that they missed the boat on these kind of critical things,
Yeah, the tricky thing is competitive for whom? I feel like Velvet represents a pivot. We can talk up the premium smaller phones from LG and how they always had completely perfectly competitive specs against a more expensive Samsung, but those devices didn't sell. So, we don't get a G9, we get a Velvet instead. And I think LG was one of the companies that took it the worst last year in 2019 during 5G, especially with the way that the V50 was handled. When I say that the Velvet is the perfect blend of compromises, I really do mean that, because
me too. It's like a perfectly competent, does everything kind of okay phone, but it's just to me it just lacks excitement somehow.
But I think,
and I hate to say that because it sucks for LG. What are they gonna do?
No, see, I disagree with you. I just think this is a phone that's not for us. You and me literally sitting on this phone I can't think of a prettier phone that's come out. So if you're walking
pretty.
if you're walking into an AT&T store, or once the Velvet goes to T-Mobile and Verizon, and LG's always pushed aside to that dusty little corner of every carrier store.
Yeah.
When you're a consumer and you go in there, if you just see another wannabe Samsung slab with a 90 hertz display, as an average consumer, you're not going to notice that there's anything special about that phone tucked out in the corner. But if you go in and you see this kind of reflective jewel tone, and then you see something next to it that looks like two screens stapled together, that might actually draw your eye. That might actually encourage you to walk over. All the things that we care about, like OIS, no one's going to notice a lack of OIS picking up this phone in a carrier store.
No.
And I can shoot 4K video chasing after my daughter on a push bike, and the software stabilization looks pretty much the same.
I'm talking about how it improves the light performance for still photography. I mean, that's really all.
But low light performance is improved because this is LG's first implementation of that 48 megapixel quad Bayer sensor. And again, the low light performance when you hold still, I've been shooting a lot with the Pixel 4a, and everyone knows Google, best night sight, whatever. But in about half the amount of time, because of the larger sensor on the Velvet, you get comparable night shots. So you don't have to hold for 6 seconds. You can hold for three. And you're still getting that overscanned
But
pixel
that's true of every 48 and 64 megapixel camera that's been out recently. And having tested a whole bunch, I don't think that LG is doing anything spectacularly better with this camera system than anyone else.
But that's just it. Does it need to be spectacularly better at $599 for a 5G device in the United States that's trying to appeal to people that want a pretty phone? That's what I mean. Is it's.
I guess I want more. I expect
LG
more.
is not targeting that for us. If targeting for us is V60, if you want all that, then you're looking at V60.
Yeah, but V60 lacked a telephoto and didn't have a 90 hertz display, which is what I dinged it on.
But, Samsung doesn't have any telephoto sensors. And again,
well, they do on the Note 20 Ultra.
Yeah, so if you step up to a
Yeah, I know.
$1,400 phone.
I know that you're right about the fact that the S20 and the Note 20 regular have like a fake telephoto.
Right. It's all pixel binning and cropping.
And it sucks. Honestly, I felt that the V60 64 megapixel zoom, if you use the main sensor as a zoom, which is basically what Samsung's doing, but they're not using the main sensor. They have a dedicated sensor, but it's essentially the same. They're cropping.
Mm-hmm.
The results are pretty much one for one. Like,
they're pretty close. And now Samsung still has a little bit of an edge because of the sub-pixel arrangement. I mean, again, we're really getting deep in the weeds
we're
there.
really getting technical.
But this is really this interesting conversation is Velvet can appeal because it's modular. You can make it a Note Lite competitor. You can just make it a really pretty phone if you just want a really pretty phone. You can go dual screen and stylus support. It's this whole new strategy from LG, cutting costs, refining, simplifying their product lines, using the same OLEDs for two different phones and two different cases. I think it's the right pivot. Now we just need to see if this is gonna resonate with consumers.
I think LG needs to sell things better too, because like
marketing, definitely.
Even as a journalist, and they never even talk to me about things like Wacom pen support. I know it's there because I'm not an idiot. But
I mean, like we were unboxing V60. It was TK and I in the middle of a live stream where we discovered that. You know what I mean? Like, again, it would be nice if LG could put a little bit more focus towards traditional marketing in North America, because it would help tell their story a lot easier than sponsored videos on YouTube. Because again, you can't reach someone. I don't think you can reach the person that Velvet is targeted for on YouTube. I think you reach the target consumer for Velvet, traditional media, billboards, TV and radio advertising, showing it off on like morning talk television
TV,
shows. Yeah, that's where you reach the Velvet consumer.
It's a phone for olds. I'm just kidding.
Whoa.
No, I think for me, what vexes me the most is that these are tiny little things that I know they didn't do because of cost saving. Like,
I think they totally did.
The OIS is not a huge deal. No 90 hertz is not a huge deal.
No, OIS on a larger image sensor that LG hasn't worked with in the past does add costs. It adds depth to the camera module.
To me, it's a deal, but I understand for a lot of people it isn't a huge deal. But I feel like every time I review a phone that doesn't have like these pillars now, I'm like, I have to point it out. And it's like, it's also annoying when you get a headphone jack and then you don't have the quad DAC when we've been used to it. It's like,
but again, it's who is this targeted for? And 90 hertz.
Well, the audience doesn't care about headphone jack. The audience cares. The audience who cares about headphone jack wants a good DAC and headphone amp.
No, I don't believe that's true, because if that were true, then we wouldn't be relegating headphone jacks to all of the poor people phones like the A51. Yeah, I'm serious. Like, you're going to see.
Is that a poor person phone, really?
Unfortunately, in our current climate of a Galaxy Fold 2 probably coming out over $2,000, an A51 now is a phone that speaks broke. But the thing is,
Walmart sells it, in fact.
Right? So if we look at 90 hertz, what does 90 hertz do? It's a more fluid looking experience, but it adds significant costs. They would have to have a different OLED or a more expensive OLED. And then we'd also probably be dealing with the lottery of black crush and green tint that seems to be plaguing OnePlus and Samsung.
The biggest reason for the not 90 hertz is because they have the dual screen case, and then it would be really expensive to have dual screen 90 hertz, right? Like,
your case would probably at least be 50% more expensive than it already is. Yeah. And since no one's buying LG at less than Samsung prices for exactly comparable specs, why play that game? And you make a pivot.
So the only thing that you probably then agree that they could have done that they didn't do, and I don't understand why they didn't do it, and I feel like they're kind of like wimping out and selling out to the carriers, is they could have made an unlocked version available.
Yeah, that's actually been a really interesting. I would have assumed maybe even the Snapdragon 845 version would make it to the United States as an unlocked option. This is the one thing I don't understand, is because of how V50 got stomped on the US carrier circuit for 5G, and then lost Sprint support when Sprint and T-Mobile joined up. That's the one thing I'm kind of curious at. Now, the realities of American 5G is unlocked right now basically means you can use 5G on T-Mobile, and then it's an unlocked 4G device. And I think that might be the reason why they're not playing that game. You know, if they want to get a phone on AT&T, if they want to get a phone on Verizon, you have to make...
Yeah, but I feel like they already make a SKU that has 5G low band, the AT&T SKU.
Right.
Sell that unlocked without the bloatware. Sell 100 of them. I don't care. It's there. It looks good.
But again, 5G is around the rest of the world, they have regulatory agencies in place to actually handle new network connectivity. Here in the United States, we've got fake competition where a new radio comes out and it's basically just an excuse to revive all of the old carrier lock-in tricks.
Yeah, totally.
So you can't take your phone somewhere else. And it's the same thing that burned OnePlus. You know, OnePlus 8 is so much more expensive in the United States because you have to have a T-Mobile version. There is technically an unlocked version, but it doesn't work on anything for 5G except for T-Mobile. Then you've got a Verizon version, which has different buttons, so you can't even use the same case. Yeah,
because of millimeter wave. Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah,
and I mean, the millimeter, don't even get me started on the millimeter wave tax, which is what I call it, which is not my idea. It was Sasha Segan who termed it. And the fact that every Verizon phone that is not, like every phone that Verizon sells that's normally only a low-band 5G phone is a custom version that costs $100 or $50 more because of millimeter wave. And sometimes there's a completely different layout in terms of controls. It's ridiculous.
So I completely agree. I think that the unlocked conversation right now is just delicate because unlocked 5G doesn't really exist yet.
I mean, Samsung's doing it.
Yeah, but can you go and take your unlocked Galaxy S20 to different carriers easily with the same? I mean, again, it's everything.
I've done it. I've got a couple of S20s that are unlocked.
But everything that's been built into this model right now and how consumers are likely to shop this stuff, the number one phone manufacturer with the widest reach, the biggest distribution, and the most leverage against Qualcomm right now is literally the only player that can play that game. Even Apple, with their $2 trillion market cap, cannot play that game with modems and radios in the United States.
Yeah, well, that's because they only started getting back into being friends with Qualcomm.
Right.
You got to be friends with Qualcomm, right?
But the point I completely agree with is if we have learned about a Velvet with a Snapdragon 845, and that's only an LTE phone, that would have made perfect sense to throw that up on B&H or Amazon, something, make it a limited edition phone, sell just a grip of them and get that sort of to help populate some of the popularity of the device. That really would have made a lot of sense. But again, everything about Velvet really speaks to that consumer going into the store experience to try and compare against an A71.
And that's my point. It's like LG is so tied to the carriers. Like, it's like you got to stop and get out of that. Even Moto made us a 5G unlocked phone with the Edge. And I've reviewed that as well. And there's tons of issues. The biggest of which is no OIS on the cameras, which in this case really matters because, as we know, Moto can't make a camera to save its life.
Yeah.
So my point is that I want to see Moto is also that company that keeps launching 5G phones other than the Edge that are like locked to carriers, and I'm sick of it. I'm like, come on. Like, this is going to become a hyper competitive segment, this $500-ish 5G range. And when Pixel comes out, we're going to talk about the leaks on the Pixel 5. When Pixel 5 and 4a 5G come out with 5G, when, OnePlus Nord comes to the US, we'll talk about that as well. Like, this is going to, like, the Velvet's not going to survive at $600. Of course, by then it'll be like $450 on sale at carriers, but it'll still be not unlocked, and it'll still be not 90 hertz, which these other phones will be, and it'll still be not OIS, which these other phones will be, and most people won't care about the dual screen case. So turning it around, because I don't want to run out of time, let's talk about the dual screen case and the context of Duo, and should you wait and buy the Duo for $1,400 without NFC with a single non-OIS 11 megapixel camera that we have no idea what the hell is 11 megapixel? I've never even heard of that sensor.
Right.
Should we wait for that, or should you go out there today? If you're going to buy from AT&T no matter what, because they're both available on AT&T, should you buy a Velvet for $700? I assume the case is $100. Basically half the price, and get better cameras. get a headphone jack, get NFC. So should you do that, or like Microsoft's promising all this cool software. I'm not sure if you watched a 35-minute video.
Yeah, the Panos, getting teary-eyed about the power of his phone.
Totally. I had it in the show notes last week, the link to that video. But do you think that the Velvet could at least somewhat compete with the Duo from what we've seen? Or do you think that
absolutely.
LG really needs to revamp the software as we've been saying they should?
No, and my criticisms of LG and software kind of go hand in hand with the fact that I think we've seen substantial improvements already. I think where we're at now is LG refining this concept so that the modularity is employed in a more direct or a more consumer accessible way. The whole thing is something like the Surface is still going to appeal to someone who has some notion of needing a higher tier of processing power. They fancy themselves some kind of power user. Maybe they're already purchased into the Surface ecosystem, going from like a Surface Book or a Surface laptop and then adding your Surface mini folding tablet phone thing might make a little bit more sense. But I mean, we should also, I don't think anyone's too shocked by the notion of it being a first generation dual screen device from Microsoft. So we keep our expectations in check there. It's sort of a curiosity. It's sort of a fascination. It's a real device. Consumers are going to be able to go and buy one and pick one up and play with one if they want to. But the Velvet on every front still represents a better true daily driver smartphone experience. For these other lifestyle quality of life features that we talk about, like wireless charging.
Right.
I'm actually not a huge fan of wireless charging.
NFC.
And we can really talk up NFC. The reality of like mobile payments, Google Pay is a mere fraction of the market for just like tap and pay from your credit card or using Apple Pay. So
that's changed a lot with the pandemic, right?
Well, contactless is people are working really aggressively to move on other contactless, but the next iteration of this is likely going to be QR codes again. Even Apple Pay is rumored to be working on QR code payments. PayPal is really popular. Venmo is really popular. I mean, there are other services that compete and go toe to toe.
WeChat Pay in China.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. And so, I don't really feel like NFC is that much of a deal breaker as much as it's probably a dying radio standard. When Apple Pay decides to implement something like QR codes, and that's already the solution I use when I go into a Starbucks. My Starbucks loyalty card is on a barcode. It's not on an NFC solution. I feel like consumers will get that.
I just feel it like it's other than barcodes, which I think is a viable option. I feel that what Samsung and LG are doing, which is using MagStripe emulation, is actually very unsafe. Is not very secure, and I think that NFC is more secure. And I feel like that's why definitely. Apple is doing NFC and Google are doing NFC. I think NFC is not going to disappear. I think NFC is so cheap. It has other uses like pairing Bluetooth devices.
Well, but that's where ultra wideband is now being pitched as the next standard.
Yeah, and maybe it'll be rolled into it, in the same way as Qi is still there as a kind of baseline wireless standard for charging, but now everybody's got their custom wireless charging standards.
But don't you feel like MagStripe kind of trained bad habits, like rubbing your phones on the credit card kiosks and
That's
stuff?
terrible. It's terrible.
Now let me wipe my phone on the payment kiosk and then touch my phone to my face when I take a call.
Yeah. I mean, look, the reality is for me, the way I look at this is I could never really get into the dual screen on the LG phones. And I'm not saying that's totally me, right? Like it's on me. I'm not saying it's not right for you or for my listeners. I feel that I just never felt that I knew what to do with that extra real estate, that I could organize my workflow to take advantage of both. And the bulk and inconvenience and battery life hit was not something I was kind of interested in living with.
Well, which is interesting because for what testing I could do, the battery hit wasn't that much worse than kicking on 90 hertz.
Totally, but that's my point. I'd rather have 90 hertz on a single screen.
You can double this.
Give me the option between two screens at 60 and one at 90. I'll take the one at 90 anytime.
No, your concerns, I think, perfectly illustrate the education gap. And this is where I really feel an LG marketing directly to consumers in more traditional methods would help this a lot. because the beautiful thing, I mean, again, one of the selling points now, it's funny watching people celebrate LG's case solution over the Surface Duo because it's part-time. You can have a regular phone, you can have a dual screen phone, you're not married to this hardware, which I think is funny because before the Surface was really out, the commentary was very like, oh, well, why would you want that? And now we've suddenly seemed to have all discovered the reasons why it might be a good idea.
I mean, LG needs to jump on this and use it as a marketing thing. Half the price, same experience. Like
pretty close. Yeah.
I mean, and it's not quite the same experience. I think that some of what I've seen in that demo for 35 minutes from Microsoft is really slick. And I wish that's LG's software has never been their strong suit in general. Like Korean companies and software, meh. But I feel like, and we know Microsoft and Google and Apple make better software. American companies make better software in general. I just feel like I want to see LG copy or emulate some of the stuff I'm seeing there. Microsoft obviously is showing things that are wow, but they've already been on the dual cases from LG, like the start to apps on a single shortcut thing,
exactly.
Right? So I think that it would be only fair for LG to copy back some of the the span feature. I think is terribly done on the Velvet and the 60 and all of the LG dual cases.
Well, and you can kind of tell like there was an engineer decision to not really focus on that and to focus more on multitasking.
And granted, there's such a gap between the two screens.
Exactly,
where
that's
the
exactly
Duo
what I
has
was going to
such
say.
a
Is
little
that
gap.
hinge?
I was doing Google Maps last night on the LG Velvet with the dual screen case and in span mode just for fun, and it was like, no, I can't do this. It's too much of a gap.
It looks okay with the screens in landscape, but there's a natural tendency to hold it in portrait because it opens like a book. No, the thing that I kind of point to, and it's a very particular mentality that I think will do very well with dual screen cases. And then I think there are a couple people that will enjoy a part-time functionality lifestyle usage for dual screen. But there's a particular feel, or there's a particular usage for gaming and for keeping multiple apps up running at the same time. I've become notorious. Like I will very regularly turn to my V60 and stream a video while I play a game. Like I don't really care much about the game audio, and at the same time I could be streaming a documentary like an audio book at the same time and be able to kind of reference both. And, now that my living room is also my wife's office and my daughter's school, we're all kind of working out our own headphone strategies and computer strategies. And now I've got a phone that handles that kind of leisure time very privately, not bothering anyone else. And it's, I can maximize that. I only got an hour to play this game. And I also wanted to keep watching that Michael Jordan documentary. So, I mean, it's things like that really kind of wake up how much power is being left unused on our phones, even on Velvet. I mean, obviously I'm doing a lot of stuff on V60 still, but even on Velvet, like this phone doesn't slow down for anything when you're playing games and streaming video, or streaming video and managing a Discord and writing an article in Word on a Bluetooth keyboard. I mean, it's getting used to that idea of moving things around, of having the extra space. The whole notion, like I've seen so many Velvet videos where all they do is open up the phone, fire up wide mode for Google Maps and go, oh, but the hinge.
No, there's more to it than that.
That is the absolute worst example of what dual screen can be used for. Kudos, you found it. But beyond that, there is laptop replacement potential. It just needs to be kind of better spoon-fed to the people who might be interested in that. And then it's still so new. There are a lot of people that would probably love it, but trying it, actually taking a risk on it or taking a gamble on it is tough to sell.
I think LG missed an opportunity by presetting some dual shortcuts. Like during setup, they should say like, we created some dual screen shortcuts we think are popular, using the apps you installed as part of your, maybe once a week, it should go through your apps and go like, oh, here are some good combos.
See, that's genius right there. Like, I that is absolutely now something that I'm going to be mad is not on.
I keep thinking like, what are the combos? Like, I can't figure them out.
Right.
Like, if I use Gmail, what I really want is what they showed on the Duo, which is the email list on the left screen and the actual messages on the right. And I can't do that right now unless I'm in portrait mode, full span. Landscape mode, full span on the tablet.
And you're trying to treat it like it's some awkward mini tablet, which Android doesn't really do.
And then
well.
it's bad because I still have the gap in between the two because it doesn't put the gap in the right place. So that's one thing that I think LG needs to address. Like, there is tablet mode on some of these apps.
I mean, I'll do you one further though. It's the hilarity. It's the thing I love about LG and kind of cringe about LG is it would be really helpful if they would just document what the sort of tap and finger gesture shortcuts were.
Right.
Because I still see techies, reviewers who should know better, tapping that tiny little icon so you can get your options to move or swap screens or turn on the second display. And like, no, don't do that. Tap on the screen, 3-finger swipe, move these things around, set up a shortcut. You can auto populate an app. But again, LG doesn't explain any of that. It's like I had to go digging through like the PR materials and some of the white papers on the dual screen case. And
nobody's gonna do that.
It's all there deep in the settings, but you're right. Like no one's gonna do that. So even though it would be great to have some of the advanced stuff that you're talking about, this I think is emblematic of some of the challenges that LG faces. This is actually way more elegant than it's been shown to be. Wide mode and these fiddly little menus is not dual screen when you're really using it. Dual screen is double tap, 3-finger swipe, split screen on another screen, pop up and floating apps, moving video around, using a whole screen as a game controller. This stuff is so fluid and organic and it's wonderfully made, but getting to it is kind of a chore when you're first trying to get your sea legs on dual display.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, that 35-minute Microsoft video really makes it look easy and intuitive and sweet. And again, if LG can copy some of that stuff and at the same time like really walk people through it and automatically generate some dual pairs, shortcut pairs, and I think that will really help a lot. And right now we're not seeing any of that, and then you end up with like reviews like mine where I was like, it's the dual screen's a gimmick anyway. I'm not going to even bother reviewing it for this phone.
But there's other things too. I mean, like we're going to get a lot of positive buzz on Surface Duo for things like just being able to prop up a screen. So even if you're only using one screen, you've got a built-in stand or, using
or tent mode. Yeah.
The tent mode or using, I love to use my V60 dual display as just a handle for the phone when I'm shooting video.
Oh yeah.
Things like that go a long way to improving the sort of ergonomic experience. But it would be nice if LG were getting out ahead because they've got the lead. They've been doing dual display since the V50. So now we need to see, can they properly communicate why they've been in this space and why, a Microsoft hard connecting two displays isn't the only solution for dual display now. It's funny, they're going to have to play defense even though they have the lead in this conversation.
Yeah. So wrapping up a little bit on this, because I want to move to earbuds, but it's kind of a segue. I put in the podcast topics that there is that LG Wing, that demo video that Android Authority posted. And we knew this was coming. Like, we'd heard rumors of this, and then we finally now have a video demonstrating it in action. It's Android Authority got an exclusive on that. Pretty cool. I guess they somehow got leaked that video. What do you think? Quick take on this design and this idea?
I'm very curious. I'm a big fan of dual modular and extra displays. I'm so familiar and I'm so into the dual screen life, having two matched displays, that it does kind of crimp my brain a little bit.
Yeah. Another workflow.
Again, it's a completely different workflow. The notion of having a full screen landscape app and then having a portrait keyboard seems kind of cool. Like, I can already see like that could be kind of a benefit.
Yeah. Can you imagine typing in what they call T mode, where you're holding to the bottom leg of the T, right?
Right.
And that's where your keyboard is.
And then same thing, like I love using mapped controllers on my dual display phones. And now I could have a Game Boy style controller
Correct.
for
Yeah.
a landscape oriented a game. I think the thing that makes me nervous is any phone with moving parts, and we're talking big OLEDs twisting and turning. I took my V60 to the beach and then, like a dummy, kept it in the dual screen case, and the entire time was just crazy anxious about whether or not I was going to get that one grain of sand
Yeah.
in the hinge. And so that's the thing that makes me a little bit more nervous about that. I mean, we've seen people that have been busting up their V60 cases, and it's a case, so it actually did its job. It's an expensive case to lose
Protection,
if you break it, but you didn't damage your phone. When that's hard built into the device, and I have similar concern from the Surface Duo.
And the Duo has this problem too, though, because
Exactly.
it's glass in the back too, right?
So now I'm more anxious about what could be a more fragile experience. Not the same kind of chuck it in my wife's purse where all gadgets go to die. Now I'm thinking about handling the device in a different way. And I'm way more cavalier with Velvet and V60 because it'll suck and it's expensive, but if I bust that case, it was just a case.
Yeah.
And now the Wing gives me a little bit more pause for an experiment because we haven't seen LG execute hinges since like the flip phone days.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, I'm kind of like going to channel Michael Fisher a little bit here, Mr. Mobile.
Right.
When phones were fun, like this is a return to that.
Oh, totally.
We need more fun form factors, and I embrace this idea, even though it might really suck and I might not like it. I just want to see what it's like. I want to play with it. I encourage companies to try things, and LG is big enough to do that. And I hope it comes to the US, or at least we can get our hands on one just to try it out.
Again, this is all said in love, and I hope that it will be good.
Oh, yeah.
But I think one of the biggest strengths, it's the thing that's made me so excited about V60 and Velvet is, LG didn't execute modular very well on the G5. The whole Friends concept was not a good execution on making one platform that could be targeted to different consumers. And now with V60 and Velvet, we have one main phone, two, but a main phone that can be a very different experience with a couple simple accessory purchases.
Yeah.
And that's what really gets me lit up. Again, this is a very smart and tactical execution from LG to save on manufacturing costs and still offer a wonderfully broad consumer experience. I just wish they were talking about it a little bit more publicly.
They need to sell it. And again, I'm worried they're not even going to take this Duo opportunity to do it. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Moving on to earbuds, I want to give you a quick, let's see, I'm going to try to time it, 30-second review of the Galaxy Buds Live.
Okay.
And then I want to talk to you about fit and how people are doing it wrong or how we can educate them to do it right. So the Buds Live, I love the form factor, and the design is genius in the sense that, like, kudos to the engineering team that came up with this idea of a bean-shaped device that fits in your ear, and it's very comfortable and it works well. It's kind of halfway between a just sits in your ear device and a goes into your ear canal device. Like for me, it's actually deeper in my ear canal than AirPods would be, like the regular AirPods. But at the same time, the sound isn't that great. I think the Buds Plus are better. And I think the active noise canceling on them is just a checkbox. I mean, it does work. It does reduce some of the lower frequencies and mid frequencies a little bit. Like it kind of basically, like I'm going to put my hand in front of my face here. Like it muffles a little bit like this,
Oh, yeah.
for the outside world, which is nice. But honestly, I get better isolation from the silicone tips on the Buds Plus, and the sound quality is better on the Buds Plus overall, I feel. So that's my quick review of having had them for about a week now, the Buds Live, or the Galaxy Beans, as I like to call them. I can't believe they didn't go for that naming.
How great would that have been? I mean, especially when even internal, like parts inside of them are referred to as the beans. I just feel like it would have been so much more fun.
Yeah. So that brings me to a thing. I don't know if you heard the podcast where I reviewed it's a few weeks back now where I've reviewed the OnePlus buds. And I still feel that for $79, they're the ones that impressed me the most in the last few buds that I've reviewed because of the sound quality. And I think it's highly dependent on fit. Because as you know, they don't have a silicone tips, right? Yeah. So they don't sit in your ear canal as equally as they would on somebody else's ear canal, especially if you adjust the size of the silicone tips. But I found them to sound phenomenal for $79. And of course, they don't do any kind of noise isolation or cancellation, but they have great battery life. They sound good. They're affordable. And so I was very impressed with them. But then I got so much pushback from other journalists and reviewers and YouTube creators about, I think they sound like crap. They're too bass heavy. And I hate bass heavy earbuds. Like, I'm kind of old school and I like mine really neutral. So I was like, what are you talking about? And then we had to start having this discussion. And I found out that after talking to half of them on messaging apps, like trying to like ask them some strategic questions, I found out that they weren't wearing them properly. And once they did, they were like, oh my God, this is completely different. And I'm like, see where I'm coming from? And they're like, yeah. And some of them are like, no, I still don't like them. And I'm like, fair enough. You probably have different ears than me. We all do. That's fair. And so I think the challenge for these original AirPod style, just sit in your ear canal, in the ear opening earbuds, like the free buds from Huawei and others, is that it's not one size fits all. And the acoustics are going to depend on how they fit in your ear.
Yeah, they're lazily the best option just to plop something in front of the ear canal.
They're easy for people because...
But that doesn't mean they're fitting.
Yes, and a lot of people don't like stuff in their ear. Like, I get it. Like, a lot of people are adverse to having something inserted in their ear canal. That's a very real thing. So, on one hand, I like the universal fit kind of idea, but we all know that's not going to sound right for everyone, and especially how do we educate them about put them on properly? Like, I like how Apple on the AirPods Pro has a thing that tells you, you need to update to the bigger or smaller size silicone tips. Like, it detects it somehow.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, like, so the whole like using the ear chamber as sort of an acoustic chamber to measure.
Correct, to measure. Yeah.
So some more stuff like that would definitely be a perk. I'm just happy to see more sort of proximity sensors being put into these things, just so that I've got a pair of earbuds that I can feel when they're starting to slide, and just as they're starting to slide,
they pause.
It pauses, and you're like, okay, see, we're starting to get it. True Wireless is starting to get it. But a part of that is also just simply, that part of your conversation where you were having that with tech journalists, just because it's cradled on the outer ridge of your ear doesn't mean it's fitting. Right. And again, I kind of lay some blame at Apple here for a very similar thing that we were just talking to LG about. Apple has never shipped a pair of earbuds with any spacers or sizers to fit. They've always saved that extra penny of cost on silicone tips or silicone bumpers. And, even back to the days of the iPod, it's always been just a generic open earbud. And that's trained a huge chunk of the consumer base that's what earbuds should sound like.
Yeah, and I think there's also, if you go further back, like I'm older, and of course I was around in the 80s when Walkman were a thing, in the 90s when Discman were a thing, and, earbuds existed, and they were all semi-open like that. They were all, like, they didn't look like the AirPod design.
It was a big deal when we started getting those crappy sport buds.
The Phontopia brand from Sony.
Right.
They all rested on your inside your ear, like not in the canal, but like on the outside on their little ledge, basically. So, growing up for me, I got accustomed to earbuds like that. And so it wasn't until I discovered like in-ear monitors, like proper in the mid-90s, like Atomatic, like Shure, like professional for musicians, and that you ideally you want a custom ear mold, or you want to use a foam earplug type tip.
That's what I'm listening to you on right now, are some custom molds.
Or even like, size the silicone properly. Like, until I discovered those, I didn't even realize there were such things as earbuds that go inside your ear canal. So today there's an abundance of earbuds with silicone tips that go in your ear canal. And I loved your video, and I will link to it, on how you explain to folks how there's different kinds of ear tips for
Yeah.
those, and that you should get custom molds if you're really serious and you can afford it, especially if you have really higher end earbuds like wired in-ear monitors,
Well,
right?
and beyond even just like the sort of audiophile experience or the professional experience, I think my wife is a really good example. She's not a media consumer in any audiophile kind of way, but her ear canals are so ridiculously small. We almost couldn't get the custom molds done, but they're so small she's never been able to properly fit any kind of in-ear bud. But now she's able to listen to music and kind of block out the world around her, turn the volume down on all of her music and movie streaming when she's streaming on them. And she's hearing things in music she's never heard before. And so even just from a practical consideration, now that we sort of normalized that like cheap wireless earbuds are going to be about $80 or $90 and nice wireless earbuds are going to be about $250,
Right.
taking the time to go and speak with an audiologist, getting custom molds done for cabled earbuds is not prohibitively expensive anymore.
No.
And again, it's like you were saying, it's you can't be better assured that something will fit than having it biologically molded to your specific.
It's like the closest thing to implants,
Totally.
And so ideally you want to, it's kind of a chicken and egg in a way, because you can pick, like, you can buy a bunch of earbuds, and I want to say in-ear monitors here because I'm talking about spending money here. So you can buy a bunch of nice in-ear monitors and compare them with the built-in tips, or use your favorite foam tips or whatever, and say, I like the whatever, the Shure or whatever, or you might get custom ear monitors made for them and then realize it's not quite the sound you wanted. That's the challenge though, right? And so,
absolutely.
So that's the tricky thing. And so if you're serious about audio like you and I are, I mean, I'm, a bit of an audiophile, so I'll be happy to spend some money on that stuff. Just be aware that it's a bit of a slippery slope. But I still think that with the combination of foam tips and various silicone tips and the silicone foam combination tips, that you can customize and get a pretty good feel of where your ears sit. And it might not be the same for both ears, by the way. And, and decide which either in-ear monitor or true wireless earbuds are the best sounding for you with the right tips. And once you get that sound and you're happy with it, if you have already spent $250, I think you can afford to spend the money on custom ear mold, because it's like amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Well, and again, it's kind of building up to that too. It's why I kind of caution people against going out. I mean, like, we had a whole conversation before we started recording. You're on your DT990s and I've got my 770s over here, different headphones and cans, and I'm just getting into planar magnetics.
Nice.
So my wallet's hurting right now. But the whole starting point, there are a number of really great resources to check out. And I've got a friend, LFA Reviews, who does a bunch of earbud reviews, but you can start this journey looking at a $20 pair of KZs and start getting a feel for what are the benefits of an in-ear monitor versus a cheap pair of earbuds. Even though they're $20, it's a dual driver ear casing, detachable cable, so you can pop different cables on there, or a Bluetooth band if you want to go with a Bluetooth band. And then you go and get yourself some cheap Comply foam tips, and you can start to feel why this is a different audio experience than like the crap that used to come with our phones. And from there, you just build your own tastes. I think we're really impressed with novelty, and when something sounds different, it's more colorful or it's more exciting. But the end point for this journey is just arriving at, I'm like you, I do not like a lot of sub bass. I'm really sensitive to mids because I've done voice recording for most of my career.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's where I'm like hyper focused to listen. And so if there's a deep V cut in the EQ, I get real cranky. I mean, just like, no, these are not for me. and I take my ball and go home.
I mean, I like super flat, super wide frequency response, super wide imaging, super detailed, punchy, but not like in your face. Not
well. And again, if you're on 990s, you want that articulation.
I mean, for me, it's like I have this kind of running jokes. I mean, my Etymotics are very old now, but they still sound fantastic. And I feel like I've outgrown them in a way. Like I feel that they're not colored enough. Like I want a little bit more passion in my music now. But when I listen to them analytically and very carefully, I realize that it emphasizes and shows you all the things that are wrong with everything. And I'm kind of past that, honestly. I'm at a point where I'm like, I don't want to be that analytical right now. I want to just enjoy the music.
Right.
So I will accept a little bit of, color and variation on that flatness to get myself into a place where I'm enjoying the music again. So, be aware that there is that trouble when you get to that level of like pureness, that's not necessarily what you want, right?
Well, and that notion of quality, like we talk about quality in very different ways when we're going from cheap disposable buds to starter in-ear monitors, different accuracy, lower distortion, better representation of the EQ, blah, 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 blah. But once you kind of reach that threshold, quality doesn't mean the same thing once you start climbing to much, much higher prices. It's not like $1,000 headphones are going to sound 5 times better than $200 headphones.
Yeah, the diminishing returns start, in my opinion, around the $300 mark.
Oh, absolutely. I was just going to say, it was like somewhere around like $200 to $300. And then for me, it's a different conversation on color, tone, clarity. It's not quality in the same way that we understand it for consumers.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I've been using DT990s over 35 years now is because, they've been around since the 80s. So it's like, and the ones I have are the Pros, which are the studio one. The reason I buy the Pros is A, they're cheaper and they're exactly the same as because they're used in studios, and they are also more rugged. Like I can literally drop them from my sitting height level to the floor, and nothing bad's going to happen to them.
Yeah, I live out of 770s and then Sennheiser HD25s just because I have used those things on so many location sets.
Exactly.
Like taking HD25s out into the desert to hold a boom mic over my head for a couple hours a day. And those things have never let me down. They're just tanks.
I know. So I love that about them. And then, again, like when I first bought DT990s in the 90s, when I finally had enough money as a poor college student to buy them, they were still like $300 or $400. Now they're $150 every day, all day.
It's so funny because we have that perception of pro audio being, a tier above, but you go and look, like, I love my One Mores. That's in $150 price bracket. I love, the AirPods Pro. We're talking $250. It's not the same game that it used to be. And there's a reason why pro audio has stood the test of time. These experiences are kind of universally agreed upon as being quality experiences.
You can buy a pair of Grados SR60 or whatever they are for like $100, $75.
Oh, so good.
The problem with the Grados is they literally, like, they're made of a biodegradable plastic and they fall apart after 2 years. But they sound freaking incredible for the money. Great. And I'm joking. I don't think they fall apart after 2 years. You just have to be way more careful than my DT990 Pros that I made for in, day out studio musicians, for sure, beating the crap out of them. So, I get it. But look, the reality is this. The takeaway, because we should switch to the next topic, is, I will link to your LG Tone free reviews because these sound interesting. Right. I will link to my OnePlus buds and my Pixel buds reviews. And folks, if you get earbuds, whether they're in-ear monitors that are wired and you're exploring that high-quality audiophile experience, which can start at a very low price point, or where you want the convenience of true wireless earbuds with or without active noise cancelling, do yourself a favor and play with the fitment of your earbuds. Mm-hmm. Put it in different parts of the ear. See where it sounds better, sounds worse. Does it hold there? Does it fit? Do I try different tips? Don't just jam them in your ear randomly and expect them to be good. And don't just assume that the tips that come with it, if it has silicone tips, is the best tip. Like, try stuff out. You'll be amazed how much more comfortable and how much better it can sound once you get a fit that works for you.
And always with the goal of being able to turn the volume down too. Again,
absolutely.
Like we're facing an epidemic.
Save your ears
of hearing loss, and I think a major contributing factor for a lot of people our age and younger is how much media we can consume over earbuds and headphones now.
Totally. All right. So the next topic, because we're running out of time, but I want to just touch on it really quickly. The ZenFone 7 and 7 Pro were announced last night. Strangely, Asus did not reach out to either of us about these, but I will link to Engadget's story. Richard Lai, my friend in Hong Kong, did a really good video of them. And basically, if you remember the ZenFone 6 last year, it has a camera that flips from the back towards the front, like a motorized, so that you don't need a selfie cam. So basically your front camera is your back camera because it just kind of pivots up, and it means you have a screen that's undisturbed. Now, last year, the ZenFone 6 was a $500 Snapdragon 855 phone. It was one of the ones we recommended the most for the money. It had a headphone jack, which was really nice. And the only thing that kind of dinged against it was it had an IPS panel, which wasn't the greatest. So the 7 remedies a lot of that by adding an OLED panel instead of the IPS. And instead of the fingerprint sensor in the back, it's on the side of the phone, which is interesting because they have an OLED. They could have put it under the display. And then it has a triple camera instead of a dual camera on that articulated flap. And so basically you now have a telephoto 3x optical and a main sensor and an ultra wide. Before last year you had an ultra wide and a regular lens. And so it's all great, right? And then you realize the Snapdragon 865 Plus for the Pro and 865 regular for the non-Pro. And you look at the price, and we're looking at $950 for the Pro and $750, which I think is really good for a Snapdragon 865. But nonetheless, to get that 5G, you're really paying for that this year with the 865 and 865 Plus on the ZenFone 7, right?
Yeah, it's been one of the more frustrating conversations to have. Again, people got really upset when manufacturers raised their prices, but it really seems like component costs, licensing and carrier costs, everything across the board just got, passed down the line from carriers and Qualcomm down to the manufacturers and right back down to the consumers. So, ZenFone was sort of a sweetheart for being such a solid buy at such a, reasonable price. And that's just not going to be sustainable for the same kind of hardware, the same kind of experience, the same perks, motorized parts on a phone, which are really expensive to engineer. All of that kind of snowballs on us. I was a little surprised to see around that $950 mark for the 7 Pro. But it kind of makes sense, when we look at what its competition is and how Asus really seems to be targeting OnePlus in some of their phone distribution strategy.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically the same pricing as the OnePlus 8, OnePlus
Exactly.
8 Pro. And you're getting a slightly better processor on the Pro, but you're mostly getting a much improved camera system across the board. The IMX686, which is the 64 megapixel sensor from Sony, is a really great sensor.
It really
and
is.
So I'm excited about it. And yeah.
I'm always going to be bummed when we lose another headphone jack phone, though. That always makes me a little sad.
Yeah, it did lose the headphone jack. I know. It's a pain. But hey, keep an eye out. I'm going to try to get a review in it. So don't despair. We'll get it. We'll get it in the shop soon. The next thing I wanted to quickly touch on is the Pixel 5 leaks. So there's a whole bunch lately. Yeah. And the latest are that this is going to be a plastic phone. And so my question to you is this, we love the 4A. We know what the 4A 5G brings to the table. Bigger screen, bigger battery, Snapdragon 765G with 5G, right? That's pretty straightforward. And an extra camera, which looks like it might be an ultra wide.
Which would be nice.
Right? And I'm, again, talking about the 4A at this point, 4A 5G. So the question I have to you is, if the 5 is the same phone as the 4A 5G, but smaller with a smaller battery, and still made of plastic, but maybe loses the headphone jack and maybe gains wireless charging, how are they differentiating there? What would you pay for that? And what is Google's strategy here?
Well, man, I think Google's strategy isn't really a strategy. Google's strategy is recover. With the exception of Samsung, who controls, the largest distribution network and makes most of the parts that goes into their own phones, every company has had some kind of delay, setback, distribution issue. And we know that the Google hardware division under Alphabet is likely not as well financed as, say, even an LG or a OnePlus.
Oh, for sure.
So when I look at this, the little nuances are it's the same conversation. Can Google properly convey to the right consumers, you are a Pixel 4a consumer and you are a Pixel 5 consumer? Because at least the rumor that I saw is that the smaller Pixel 5 was going to have a larger battery than the Pixel 4a 5G. That at least some of those.
I didn't realize that.
And then again, we're still in rumor territory. None of that's confirmed. Right. We don't know that that's what's going to be. But if we're talking your precious 90 hertz display.
Well, I definitely want that.
If we're talking wireless charging.
Definitely want that.
The biggie for me, will the Pixel 5 get the neural core hardware that was genius on the Pixel 4?
Yeah.
So I don't think people really understand this. I've been screaming it from the mountaintops, but we can sit there and praise iPhone 11 Pros all day long for being air quote content creator phones, but no one smashes up image data better than Google. This combination of Google software, Google optimization, and the hardware that goes into this, we could be looking at one of the only 765s to handle video more like a premium flagship tier device. That's my hypothesis.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm willing to give the Pixel 5 an extra $100 to $200 for all those extra things. Like, I know it's going to miss the headphone jack, and I don't like it, but I'll live with that. I'd rather have wireless charging, IP rating, 90 hertz display. And I'm glad that both the Pixel 5 and 4a 5G are supposed to have an ultra wide instead of the telephoto, because as good as the telephoto was, as I demonstrated in my recent Instagram post of 5x zoom shots taken with the Pixel 4a, it does a pretty damn freaking incredible job at 5x.
Okay? Oh, it really does.
And yeah, sure, 2x optical would help, but I'd much rather have ultra wide. Like, I miss the ultra wide so much in my 4a review. I'm so used to like be able to like
just
capture stuff that is fun. So I'm glad about that. I just feel like my only concern is like $100 to $200 more for those seems like high when I'm also not getting. Like, I'm getting just a plastic shell and a rear fingerprint sensor. Like, don't get me wrong. I still like a rear fingerprint sensor. I really do, because you can unlock while it's still in your pocket. And by the time you pull it out, it's unlocked. But I feel like for a flagship, that's like I'm glad they're not sticking with the face authentication thing, because nobody's adopted the APIs, right? I mean, so many apps are still missing it. And it's, again, that's Google's fault for not transitioning the developers like Apple did seamlessly. But I feel like if I'm going to have one of two, a fingerprint sensor or Face ID type sensor on an Android phone, I'd rather have the fingerprint sensor. So I'm surprised that they would put it in the back on a Pixel 5.
No, I think Pixel 5 is actually kind of a similar reaction. This is so funny. I kind of keep falling into the same, cycle here. I'm a broken record, but the Pixel 4 got savaged by tech reviewers, didn't really sell all that well. And I feel like it was kind of unfairly hounded for the leaks that happened a month before the phone actually came out. Like, people had their minds made up. They didn't like the Pixel 4 before they really used it, from a lot of the commentary that I saw. But you learn that lesson. So we're going to call the Pixel 5 the flagship of the Pixel line.
Yes.
But if it's coming in at like $699, and we know it's going to have the bleeding edge of Google software, it's not going to be playing that game with a starting storage of 64 gigabytes of storage.
Yeah, they learned that lesson.
Yeah, again, that was the right lesson to learn. I actually kind of would like to get back to alternative materials. Like, I'm real tired of glass being the premium material. I'm fine making a compromise when that's reflected in a price that's not going to be starting at $899 or $999, and it's going to be a 5G device. I think this communicates, and I think this resonates well with a pivot. I think, just like the Velvet, it's the right combination of compromises, given that Google makes a software platform delivery system first and foremost. Everything that they're going to put into this that's nice is going to show off Google services. Velvet is all about, can I impress you with metal trim and glass and curved edges? That's a completely different conversation and a different set of compromises. But I guarantee you, hand in hand, between those two phones, between $600 and $700, which phone's going to feel nicer as the phone when most people just take it out of their pocket to use it? I'd be willing to bet pretty good money the Pixel experience is going to be more sought after than the Velvet experience.
Oh, for sure.
And then it goes right up against a phone like the A71, you've got your flagship Google experience going up against Samsung's quietly sort of delivered 5G compromise phone.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think for me, I don't have any issues with plastic because they're not trying to pretend it's another material. That's my biggest gripe with, like, like the mid chassis, the
or like the Note 20 that they're trying to show off.
Yeah, the back on the Note 20, the mid-frame chassis on the OnePlus Nord, we like painted like metal. Like, come on, just leave it matte. It's fine. We understand you pick plastic to save money. It's okay. Like, yeah. Anyway, we should move on. Speaking of OnePlus Nord, there's a rumor of a cheaper Nord, like a Nord Lite or something, that appeared in, I don't remember exactly where they found this stuff, but that says it might have, there might be a version of the Nord with a Snapdragon 460. And I'm like, what the F?
Not great. I mean, even just stepping down to like a 630 ish style CPU would be preferable. I mean
690. There's definitely a rumor on a 690 5G phone, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I've loved playing with some of these like $100 phones, like Cool Pads, and I got my Stylo on a great sale.
I mean, right now I have a bunch. I have the Nokia 5.3.
Exactly.
I have the Moto E and the Moto G Fast. They're all around 150 to $200, and they don't suck, but they're also not great.
Yeah, but stepping down for OnePlus means a number of other compromises on a brand that I don't think has ever really played in that space before, and I think it sets up expectations.
Yeah, I'm a little worried.
Yeah.
Between, like, I reviewed the Nord and I loved it. The Nord itself, as it exists today, is a fantastic
Super cute.
phone.
Yeah.
But I'm a little worried when I see what they're doing with Oxygen OS 11 and what these rumors are of even a 690 5G version of the Nord, or like a Nord Lite or whatever 460 version that's rumored now that could be happening. That they're really diluting the brand. Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
Well, and when you step back from like a OnePlus 8 to a Nord, there's still like a continuity of OnePlus-ness.
For sure.
And I don't know how you can maintain that.
Yeah.
You step down to a 460, but you're still banking on the OnePlus name. And to me,
and
I
maybe
worry
it's
that
just
that's
India only. Who knows?
Yeah, well, that's definitely true too, is having a completely different regional strategy. But I'm still hoping that Nord makes it to the United States before holiday season. Like, it's a phone that deserves to be here.
It needs to be here with 765G though. It needs to be here with 765G at $500. I mean, that would blow my mind.
Again, I'll be real curious to see if any of these lower cost 5G options can survive the low prices and the margins as soon as they start playing ball with American carriers. I believe every single one has to take a bump.
Well, if T-Mobile, who's always very aggressive on pricing, agrees to take on the Nord as it is today, with obviously 5G bands for T-Mo for say $550, I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's good territory. Again, I mean,
right?
look at how great that fight becomes between a Pixel 4a 5G, a Velvet, an A71, a Nord. Like, that gets really exciting and actually starts to move the needle on 5G.
Yeah, Moto Edge is in there too, if they can drop the price again a bit, like they had it at launch, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of affordable phone, the last thing on the menu here we have to quickly mention, I really just want to mention it because we need to wrap up, but it's like Moto launched a G9. They just launched the G8. So just to be clear, the US now has just the G and the E series. They don't number them anymore, but abroad, they're still doing the numbering. And so they did the Moto G8 abroad and a bunch of variants. Some of them we got in the US as the G Stylus and the G Power and the G Fast. And now they're doing a 9 already. It's been like, I think it's like 6 months since the G8 launched. So we're not seeing a G9 in Europe. So there you go.
It's an interesting strategy.
Moto's really making too many phones.
I was trying to find a really delicate or polite way of saying, no, I think they need to pump the brakes. This is getting a little difficult for me to track. So there's no way consumers are really keeping pace with.
I mean, there was just the the Moto G 5G Plus that launched in Europe as well, which is essentially a part of the G line, but it's the first 5G $500-ish phone. So it's their entry to compete with the OnePlus Nord. That came out in Europe 2 weeks ago. And so now this G9, and I'm wondering if any of these are going to come, the G series, the G9 equivalent is definitely going to come to the US in some way or another. But I'm wondering if we're going to get a $500 5G phone from Moto. That's what I want to see happening, because they have such good, clean software that would make me happy, you know?
Yeah, and again, I mean, it's fair to say like, oh, I'm never the biggest fan of Moto cameras, but yeah, I've had family members rock. You know, like my sister just recently got rid of a G4. I mean, they are daily driver phones, and they totally get their audience for, you know, just getting apps in your pocket as efficiently as possible.
They're solid phones. Like, honestly, I mean, they're not exciting and incredible in any way, but they get the job done.
Totally.
They're pretty good workhorses, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, JC, do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet? All your various streams and channels and social. I know you do a whole bunch of stuff like Twitch, so can you just tell us?
For sure. I make too much stuff. So the easiest place to kind of keep track of the main thread is somegadgetguy.com. I'm Some Gadget Guy across almost all of social media. If you search for, you know, Some Gadget Guy on Twitch, you're going to find me there. And then I'm still producing and hosting for Newegg. So we've got a bunch of videos coming out on gaming. I just recently put out one on mobile gaming, how we would fix the reputation of terrible, you know, mobile games and gotcha mechanics and stuff like that. The easiest place to find it all is my website.
Yeah, check it out, folks. I think your content is really unique and I really love it. So I hope that you, my listeners, go and check out JC's hard work and subscribe. You also have a Patreon, right?
That's right. I do also do a Patreon, patreon.com/somegadgetguy. It's because this has become sort of less popular content on YouTube. It's where I keep all of my deep dives for the granular audio testing that I do and the camera comparisons and the long form camera reviews that I've been doing for years now. Those are now all on the Patreon.
So go support JC, folks. And you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl on Instagram and Twitter. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book character, but without the vowels. If you want to discuss the podcast, Twitter is really the best option. If you want to look at pretty pictures of phones and taken with phones, Instagram's where you want to be. If you also want to watch videos and visual moving picture content that goes well with this audio podcast, consider subscribing to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. There's a bunch of unboxings and hands-ons and review videos there, so check that out. Also, if you just landed on the podcast and you want to subscribe, it's at mobiletechpodcast.com. And you can also subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify. Basically, everywhere good podcasts are found, you will find the show, and you should definitely join. Also, consider whatever podcast app you're using. If you can rate the podcast or review the podcast, please do it. That really helps. You know, this is a bit of a labor of love for me. There is a donate link in the show notes. It's a PayPal donate link if you want to help out. I want to thank my audience for recently. Somebody sent me $50. That was quite a nice donation, so thank you for that. I appreciate it a lot. Finally, I want to thank our sponsor, Audible. Audible.com has been with us since the very beginning of the show, and they're our sponsor, which means that you get something in return for helping them help us, basically. Audible is a really great platform for books, audiobooks. So if you like to listen to books, or I personally like to read books, but I always find myself listening to them because of road trips or other things. I always use this example, but I think it's a good example. If you're like a delivery driver and you're having to listen to maybe podcasts all day, you know, maybe you want some longer form stuff that lasts throughout the day, and an audiobook is really a great way to do that. So the deal is you get 30-day free trial, and you get to keep a book at the end, like a free book, which is great. And if you join, whether you stay or not, you support the podcast. So that's kind of like how the two-way street works, and everybody loves it. What I like about Audible myself is they have like the best selection of books, and you know, some of them are read by the authors, which I think is really great. Like, you really get into the flow, hearing what they actually wrote with their own hands. It's kind of cool. So consider helping out by joining Audible if you're not already a customer, and taking advantage of this opportunity, this offer. There's a link in the show notes. It is audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. So please consider helping out, and I want to thank Audible for being our longtime sponsor. And finally, JC, thanks for being on the show again.
Yeah, for sure. I'm again, you popped up on Twitter and I was like, Miriam, I haven't spoken to you in so long. We've got to do this.
I know. So cool that you were able to join us this week. And we'll have you on again for sure in the future. And until then, folks, there'll be another show next week. So stay tuned for that. And we'll see you then. Cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.